Good evening and welcome to tonight's episode. We have the wonderful Brittany Murray on. She's going to be talking to us about veterans advocacy and also diving into mental health. I do like to put out a quick trigger warning. We are going to talk about some heavy topics tonight, suicide and things like that, so viewer discretion is advised. Stick around and enjoy the episode.
3, 2, 1, 0.
All right. Hey, Brittany, how's it going? It's been a while. I think the last time we served together, for the folks out there, Brittany and I served, I want to say, 2009 or maybe mid 2010, somewhere in there. We were air
Yep.
crew together out overseas. It's been a while. I know we've caught up for some coffee since then. It's been great to see you in person. And I'm so happy you could come on today. It's 14 years since we served together. What have you been up to since then? And what are you up to now?
Wow, I cannot believe it has been 14 years on the dot. It's pretty wild actually how quickly time goes by.
I had a lot more
Uh,
hair back then.
a lot more hair. I'm kidding. Uh, those are good days. So yeah, it's been a long time, Josh, and it's great to
Yeah.
see you again. And thank you for having me. I've been up to quite a bit. I shortly after that deployment, actually maybe not that shortly thereafter, but I ended up leaving the Navy in 2015 and went back to school and in the Seattle area and did some work in that area as well before I went back to school again. And because I wanted to study public administration, so went back to school in the Seattle area, and then I came to Washington D.C. in about 2021, and I started working for the Veterans of Foreign Wars in the Washington office. So where what they do there is legislative advocacy, and then that's also where the VFW's National Veterans Service their team is based out of. And they do a lot. They do the service work of the organization, helping veterans get connected to their benefits. So it's been a ride, and I'm psyched to be here.
Yeah, I didn't realize one of my other jobs I work has me roaming around the city a lot. I didn't realize it's weird. Some near some of the Senate buildings in Congress and all that. There's all these other random buildings that sometimes you just don't know. And I didn't realize the VFW building was so close, which it should be, right? It's so close
Mhm.
to where all the action is. So it's kind of good to see.
Absolutely, it's phenomenal. We're very plugged in, and it's a the VFW has an excellent relationship with both the Veterans Affairs committees and the House and Senate, and so it's we're really fortunate to have the location, like you said, and also the footprint and the relationships with everyone on the Hill to be able to influence and inform legislative activities. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I
it's
would say for a lot of there's a lot of veterans groups out there, but then probably what 2, 3, 5 really big ones. And at least even growing up, I remember the VFW was always at like the parades in town, things like that. So I feel like if
absolutely.
not the biggest, I don't know, you might know better than me. They're definitely one of the top out there for veterans advocacy and veterans
Yes.
concerns and stuff. So
Absolutely. And the VFW has some phenomenal peers in the space that are right along with us. DAV, American Legion, Wounded Warrior Project, and others that are incredible advocates doing fantastic work every day. They're at the table advocating for their specific issues, which is that's the biggest thing I have learned since you and I met,
right,
going through this entire journey in the past, geez, over a decade is um, since landing here is realizing how incredibly important it is for people who are affected by policies to be at the table as those policies are being discussed, um, as legislation or is being discussed as it's being tweaked, if you will, throughout the process that legislation goes through. It's so critical for everyone to be at the table, especially if they're going to be impacted by that legislation. You know, um, And sorry, I don't want to make this. I definitely don't want to make this about that, but that's a huge it's a huge takeaway for me how critical it is. I think it's every issue, including mental health.
Right.
Those working in the mental health space, because um, staffers on the Hill, legislators, they don't. There's such an amazing, incredible amount of topics being discussed on the Hill every single hour, every day. Um, that it is not possible to capture all the nuances and hear from all the stakeholder groups that really ought to be included to ensure that legislation is really serving these populations in the best, most effective and efficient way possible. And so that's a massive, massive takeaway for me that I would like to share with others. You know, the sheer importance of advocacy for whatever it is that you're affected by, or have experience with, or um, lived experience, for example, and just the importance of being here and at the table. And I think that's at every level of government. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. It's
yeah.
almost like, and I've never been to a hearing or anything like that live, but even just roaming around the building sometimes and seeing the like
Mhm.
busyness of everything.
Yes.
Like you said, getting your and it's such a short window when you guys get to speak or get people get to speak on certain topics, and then like literally on to the next thing, right? But
Yes.
yeah, it's very, very important to get it in there and get it in front of all the politicians, I guess, right? So,
Absolutely.
so back to you a little bit because I know you've been doing
Yeah.
so much great work for the veterans out there and active duty folks.
Yes.
Can you discuss some of that stuff you've been doing?
Oh wow. So these days I'm doing communications and public affairs. I just transitioned to that role a short couple of months ago. So before that, I was doing legislation, and I wasn't doing legislation so much on the veteran side of the house. It was more so it was in the DoD space. So interacting with the armed services committees, in the House and Senate, and then DoD itself, and then other stakeholders who are in the conversation. And so uh, with that work that I was doing, it was, it was very broad spectrum, military quality of life issues, uh, medical care. Big one was transition. So those folks, about 200,000, that's a rough estimate. About 200,000 individuals transition from the military each year, and so one of VFW's major focuses, and therefore my major focus is that transition point, and looking at the policies and programs in place, legislation in place that guide the transition process, and how DoD, VA, how DoD, VA, and other stakeholders like Department of Labor are and SBA, the Small Business Administration, are interacting in that process and ensuring that service members get the best possible experience on their way out to becoming veterans. And so that was uh, something that's very near and dear to me. So I was extremely fortunate to be able to work on that for about 2.5 years.
Yeah, I think the transition piece is such an important one. I mean, I just transitioned a couple years ago now. I'd say I was lucky to have gone through like executive tap. For the most part, the majority of the briefs they gave me were I thought were decent. Sometimes with like everything, you get the people that just want to get off the stage and get through it. Um, I think the interesting thing was, yeah, like a lot of that structure's in place, and I think some of it was good. But at the same time, had I not, I was lucky enough to be been in for long enough that I had friends and peers that already retired, and I found that that was a big um, thing for me to do was reach out to them and ask them questions too. Which, yeah, I was afforded the ability to do that because of my time in the relationships. But a lot of people don't have that at all either, and so many people are just I don't want to say getting out with nothing transition wise, but literally, it's like a check in the box. They try to go through the transition classes, and that's kind of it, and they're left to their own thing. So I would agree with you. You're right. This, you know, very important topic. Probably a lot more to go. A lot better to be at some point.
Mm, absolutely. There's absolutely there's a lot to be done, and there is a lot of focus on that, on transition from the military, because we know that unfortunately it's while transition is a really it's it's a point, it's something that every single service member experiences, and everyone experiences it in a different way, and everyone has different needs. And because
Right.
of that, there's no single successful transition. It's what is a successful transition is unique to every person. And on that note, every family. So
True.
because many people are transitioning out, not alone, but it's also their families for transitioning as well. So it's a it's a it's a very significant milestone in every service member's life, and it looks different for everyone and has different complexities. And so the big question is, um, how can DoD, this a major part of the responsibility is on DoD because they have operational control over these individuals on their way out.
Right.
So the VA can only do so much, before an individual actually becomes a veteran. And so it's an integral, critical relationship that DoD and VA have, in order to streamline the processes as much as they can, ensure individuals have access to the appropriate resources that they need to be successful. And again, that looks different for everyone. And also that they're getting access to those resources in a timely manner, in a
Right.
consistent, timely manner. And unfortunately, that's not the case across the board. So, and the reason, one of the big reasons this is so important, which I know I believe you and I are going to talk about momentarily, but um, transition can be an exciting time for some people, and they make it through just fine, and they're successful on the other side. They land on their feet, but that's not the case for everyone. And so, unfortunately, at that transition point, there is an increased risk for suicide, and so that is a very real statistic. Individuals are at heightened risk within the first 6 to 12 months after transition. And there is a phenomenal program out there that VA has launched called the Veteran Sponsorship Initiative that aims to identify those individuals at heightened risk so that they can connect them directly to the resources they need um, before they leave DoD, before they leave the government's, um, uh, before they transition. Well, and so they are. It's a really positive program so far, and myself personally and VFW, we're looking forward to seeing that continue and hopefully expand.
How
So it's an
with that
exciting
program,
time.
how are they how are they identifying the people that might need extra care, or that due to some mental health things?
So they have a really interesting instrument, and it's a quick 17 question um, questionnaire that not everyone's. It's not deployed across the whole DoD, so
Gotcha.
it's only at certain sites right now. But it's a 17 question uh, uh, sequence of questions, and I believe it's actually predictive analytics that they're using. It's been developed in order to identify individuals who are at disproportionately high risk for suicide during their transition period, or shortly after, like I said, that year window after service. Um, and once those individuals are identified, they're split up into different groups, I guess, of where they're at on that spectrum of risk, and then they are appropriately connected to resources, including a sponsor. So something that you mentioned that stuck out, and why this I'm glad we're kind of here at this point in the conversation, is you mentioned the importance of connecting with individuals on the other side, to kind of have like a mentor, if you will. Um, and what that sounds like is when service members PCS to a new duty station, there's often another service member there waiting to help you settle into that new duty station. Show you where the commissary is or the grocery
Right.
store. Show you where work is. Show you where, if you're a family, this is where the local child care facility is, the CDC. You don't have that when you leave the military. So part of the VA's Veteran Sponsorship Initiative is they've connected. They're working with an organization called Onward Ops, and Onward Ops, they have vetted individuals, and the VA does the. If I remember correctly, the VA does the vetting of the individuals who become sponsors, and so the idea is to connect individuals with sponsors who are in the communities that will reside in after they discharge. So it's essentially the same idea as having a sponsor when you get to your next duty station. Well, this organization connects you to the sponsor at home, on the other side once you become a veteran. So it's a really, really exciting program, and I'm excited to see where it goes, because I think it's a significant piece in that transition discussion for those folks who are could benefit.
Yeah, I, that's definitely an awesome program as they're rolling it out. I think, I mean, I would gladly be a member of that to help people out, and I think so many of us would be or would
Yep.
be willing to. I mean, because the reality is, it's not going to take a ton of your time. You're helping people out.
Right.
We've talked about this over coffee. It's like one of the problems with folks that are retired from the military or just separated is that finding that sense of purpose. And I almost feel like
Hmm.
it kind of gives everybody, even the people that are trying to be the mentors and the sponsors, it gives them an automatic sense of purpose when they get out too and try to help out. So it's like those people could also be find themselves in some sort of mental health situation or crisis just because of their transitioning or retiring or
Right.
separating. And I think it's almost like if they make a good mentor for that program, it's like this ever great big circle of, okay, now they have their own sense of purpose again,
Hmm.
and they're helping fellow veterans, which I think that's an awesome thing. And I think the good
Yeah,
thing too
exactly.
is the recency of a lot of it. Like, yeah, maybe 15 years from now, I'm not going to be the best contact out there to talk about transitioning from the military. Um, but right now I'd be good. And I think, like
Right.
you said, there's a lot of people, and I think if you can get those transition folks to reach out to people that are in their communities that know what they're about to go through and things like that,
Hmm.
I agree. I can't imagine that not being an awesome program to get rolled out.
Absolutely. And just one more point on that, and I think you alluded to it perfectly, is you're going from one social support network, to for some people they may not have any support network, on the other side, if you
Right.
will, once they become veterans, um, because the military is essentially a big family, really. And when you get out, some people, like I said, their transitions are relatively seamless. They have a support network set up outside, but that's not the case for everyone.
Right.
And so having a sponsor, you know, is it's really, it could be it can be highly beneficial from just mutual camaraderie, having a shared lived experiences or similar shared lived experiences, right? Because we've heard about the civ mil divide and challenges with folks who haven't served, even though there's tremendous support out there. There's also a quality of spending time with somebody who has similar lived experiences,
Yeah, for sure.
and the percentage of the U.S. population that has served is so small that having a critical, even just a single connection to somebody, could really be tremendously impactful in a positive way.
Yeah, you make a good point about the population being so small, and I find it now, and maybe it's now because I'm in my 40s, and I'm taking a Spanish class, and the majority of people in the class are in their 20s. But even other people, I play in some hockey teams, and all these groups I meet, and a lot of people, and this is in the DC area where we both live, where there is a ton of government and a ton of military. I'd say more
Yes.
often than not, I'm the lone military person in the room or former military, and a lot of people
Mhm.
just don't have that experience. And it's always interesting because I seem to get a lot of questions all the time, which is nice. But it is something to think about that you don't really think about is the really small population of active duty and veterans out there, and like you said,
Right.
trying to connect them with the right people.
Right.
Um,
Right.
One thing I want to hit on real quick too, because we were talking about transition.
Sure.
It's an interesting thing that I just thought about when we were talking. There's a lot of people that have that, and I know this maybe is a sore spot for some other veterans that were honorably discharged. There is a group out there that maybe get another than honorable discharge, admin separation, even dishonorable discharge, and that's a whole nother, that could be a 3-hour topic there, and on what they get from the VA and things like that. But that's my point was the quickness of those transitions are pretty quick sometimes, and to the point where you already have folks that are, the first thing that comes to my mind is, say, somebody that used an illegal substance or something and they get kicked out. typically that can happen pretty quickly. So you already have a military member that, they screwed up, whether they did it on
Hmm.
purpose or whatever they meant to. It was one mistake, who knows? But they screwed up, and then all of a sudden, they're already going through the fact that they screwed up, and maybe now they're like, "Oh, what did I do?" They're going through this whole
Hmm.
thing, and then they have to transition really quick, pretty much because they're getting, separated from the military. Yeah, I just think there's a whole nother, population out there that I wasn't really thinking about too. When you're talking about transition of like, I had the luxury of planning, right, and I had planned for years, and then when I decided to do it, I had a great support group, but I
Hmm.
that might be, I'm probably in the minority for that. And then what percentage of people separating are the people that are gone within a month, or gone within 2 months, or even
Right.
less, and that there's no time. I mean, even if you go through the separation courses because you have to, right, in that short window, you're pretty much left on your own at that point. And then who knows? Like,
Right.
one of the commands I was at, we had some folks get separated for drug stuff, and I always wondered, and I never really followed up and checked them out afterwards. But
Hmm.
where did they end up after that? Who knows? Like,
Right.
so I don't know. Just interesting topics for sure.
It absolutely, and that is that is such a difficult that is such a difficult prospect in reality for some people because the transition is difficult enough, right?
Yeah.
And there's again I should say transition can be difficult enough because I want to be mindful of not speaking in generalities as
Right.
if this is the experience of the majority because it's not it
It's
necessarily
not.
it isn't necessarily that's
Right.
not
Right.
really the case necessarily. So um but to your point, you had a lot of time to plan. You had a long lead time to plan and, be mindful of timelines for when you had to, apply for certain benefits if you wanted to use them, to have them available for use, upon discharge, um, for example, if you wanted to go back to school
Right. Right.
and make sure you get your college application done, in time for you to start out, after discharge, in whatever quarter or semester. And so those basic planning kind of goes out the window for folks who are unexpectedly discharged for whatever reason. And so that adds a lot more complexity. So there's another part of this conversation, which is the community response to veterans, welcoming veterans back into their communities after they leave service. And so that's another part of the discussion of uh, how can communities best assist. Uh, what would an ideal community response look like to
Right.
veterans
Exactly.
coming home with various types of discharges who may not necessarily be um, eligible for the same benefits based on whatever that discharge category type is. So that's a great point, and
Yeah.
something
The
that
researcher nerd in me is now curious. The everybody always talks veterans and homelessness and things like that. I'm just curious now. I wonder how many, the backgrounds of those homeless veterans, or some of those veterans that um, fell on hard times. Like, what was
Mhm,
their, and there is definitely, veterans now and recent veterans, and I say recent like OAF and OEF and Gulf
mhm,
War era veterans, and of course there's Korean, Vietnam, post Vietnam era veterans that are out there now that have issues and are homeless and things like that. I wonder what their backgrounds were from the military. Like, I had an uncle that, he's long passed, but um, Vietnam vet, and he had significant alcoholic problems. Was in and out of shelters as a and jail, and I often
mhm.
wonder. I don't know a lot of history about his service time and what happened back then, but yeah, it's just interesting. Some of the where in that time frame can we insert ourselves to maybe like
Right,
not let it get to that point. You know what I mean? And I think that's the big thing. I just
exactly.
talked over the weekend about the mental health thing, and I had a talk on Tuesday at a conference, and part of the big discussion was, not letting it get to the point of crisis and trying to figure out a point as a leader, or as even as a coworker, as a peer, to like insert something or insert yourself, or you know to get it to tackle the problem early, basically. So it's just interesting, I think. So,
Right. It absolutely is. I think there's oppor- there, opportunities upstream to intervene, to assist individuals, and it's, you know, question is the how. What's the
Wow.
best way to identify these intervention points and how to get the appropriate resources to these
Well,
folks when they need it.
and
Meet
like you
them
said
when and where
earlier,
they are.
speaking in generalities, there probably isn't one magical answer, right? It's just a matter of
No,
trying the best we can at some point and then going from there.
exactly.
Um, all right, we'll move on a bit. In your opinion, what are some of the biggest issues facing, active duty currently serving folks and the veterans communities today?
So there are definitely several
We have time.
issues that we can. Yeah, we get. There are definitely multiple areas that
Mm,
we can touch on. And again, I want to preface this with, a lot of folks are doing well and they're successful, uh, and so I want to try to avoid making this seem like, this is the experience of everyone, because
right,
it's
right.
because it's because it's not. But there
It's
are
not.
there are uh, many successful service members in veterans who have the resources and skills, knowledge, expertise, et cetera, to be successful during and after service. Um, and but then there are, to your point, we have other issues such as like veteran homelessness and challenges with the food and food security, and so I hesitate to talk about like what the biggest challenges are, because those, if depending on what stakeholder group you speak with, you know the answers are probably going to be different. There are organizations that are, I can think of an organization specifically that's focused on, like for instance, Paralyzed Veterans of America,
Right, right.
PVA.
Yeah.
They're advocating for veterans who have, spinal cord injuries from service. So if you ask them, their answers might be a little bit different. But there's a through line here, and that, I mean, I think we can all agree on, is that I would say the most egregious problem is veteran suicide. One suicide is too many,
Too many. Right.
and we know that veterans are still taking their lives at a um, disproportionately to civilians without service history. So uh, it's a really complex issue, as is well known. There's no single answer to prevent suicide in general, and so what I can say is that we need more information. And so one of the things that the VFW is very much advocating for is, so two things. We spoke about transition already, and then with that, what happens after service? Those folks who go, they leave service, they become employed, maybe they get involved in communities, they find a new sense of purpose, they find new support networks. They go on to have, you know, reliable, consistent housing and, income and so on and so forth. That's phenomenal. But of those, and they're the majority, right? But of those folks who do end up taking their lives, what factors were in play at that time? And so we talk about suicide. Historically, it's been from a health perspective. So, for
Right.
instance, the VA's suicide report is from a health perspective. VHA, Veterans Health Administration, and the VFW like to see that changed, because there's more to every individual than whether they went to the hospital or not, whether they went to a VA facility in a certain time period prior to them passing away. There's also other factors like, were they in receipt of benefits? Uh, had they used their VA home loan, um, for example? And so that's where the VBA comes in, the Veteran Benefits
Right.
Administration. And so, unfortunately, that information is not included in the VA's suicide report. So, the VFW is advocating for a bill right now. It's in the House and Senate. It's called the Not Just a Number Act. And what that would do is mandate that, number one, the VA suicide reporting team be removed from VHA and moved up to the enterprise level so that they're not siloed. And two, it would incorporate not just VHA data into the suicide report, but VBA data into the suicide report as well, to try to give us more information about, indicators of for what could be, are there any trends going on? Are veterans who interact with these benefits, you know, more likely to, be successful, or they, is there some magic combination of benefit usage, for example, or healthcare usage that could align or misalign to potentially influence these outcomes, these negative outcomes. So information is definitely important to understand the full story behind why veterans are taking their lives, and then reaching back, to your point, this is a really complex issue, and so how can we get more upstream to intervene to ensure that people have the best possible chance at successful, fulfilling lives after service, of
Right.
whatever that looks like for them. And so, one um, one area that we have seen is recently VA did um, they did include some very, very, very high level VA benefit data and in their suicide report. And one of the statistics that stood out to me was the individuals who had interacted with with the VBA um, were less likely to die by suicide. So the VBA, but it
Okay.
was very, very, uh, but it was very high level, like wave tops number. And so one of the other areas that VFW is heavily advocating in is ensuring that veterans who or service members who want to connect with their benefits after service have the opportunity to do that, uh, at least to receive the information in a consistent manner while they're going through TAP class, the Transition Assistance Program. So what that looks like, it's called the TAP Promotion Act. And what that would do is ensure that accredited service officers, so individuals such as like VFW accredited service officers, DAV, Legion, any or even county VS officers. So
Right.
uh, there are county service officers across the country. So if they wanted to come into a TAP classroom to talk about VA, the benefits delivery at discharge program, and just to make individuals aware that this is something you can apply for before you get out of service, between 3 and 6 months before you get out of service, so that you can get your benefits as close to discharge as possible. Um, we would like to see individuals have direct access to accredited representatives in TAP classrooms, because right now some people have that, but others don't, because it's highly variable. Because it's right historically, it's been at the um, we've seen challenges at different installations because of turnover of who's in command, and also the TAP managers. So luckily, we have the VA, and in January they started incorporating a portion of TAP, so that they'll have accredited service officers are allowed in to talk about benefits for a portion of the TAP class. So
That'll be good. Yeah.
it's going to, a lot of the feedback we receive, and people who've subsequently learned about the BDD program after service, are saying, "Gee, I really wish that we knew about this then." Because it would just help seamlessly connect individuals to their benefits if they want to be connected. So it's not a compulsory thing, but there's something about having an individual in the classroom who can talk about applying for this program, and then being able to directly connect to them, like person to person, face to face, to be able to get that process started when they enter that eligibility window. And so that's what the VFW wants to see, is every service member having that access during TAP, if they want to engage with that program that the VA
Yeah.
offers.
I think that's good because it's like, it planted that initial seed and thought in folks' mind that, like, okay, now I'm actually seeing this person in front of me, or seeing them virtually. They're explaining the programs to me, because I feel like
Right.
a lot of it now is still put on the veteran to figure it out. Like, they get these overviews and stuff, but then
Mhm.
it's still on the veteran to reach out. Especially when it comes to like disability and stuff. A lot of times it's, hey, you got to find a VSO or do this and that to figure your stuff out when you can do it on your own. And you hinted at the BDD program, which I think is makes it a lot easier nowadays. But I
Right.
think, yeah, maybe getting those folks in the room when we're doing these transition classes and courses, I think it's yeah, definitely helpful. And I do find it interesting
Absolutely.
that you hinted at the numbers, the initial kind of high level numbers from the VBA, in regards to suicides. That it's interesting. I just wonder. I wonder if all those, it seems like a lot of people that do get into the benefits right away, whether they're home
Mhm.
loan or educational. And I mean, shoot, from when we came in, the educational benefits are a lot better than they were then, even though they were good.
Right.
But now you can, use, you get that housing allowance, you get some of the other stuff with the post 9/11 GI Bill, which I think is important for transitioning folks, especially the younger folks that maybe didn't get a degree while they're in.
Exactly.
So I just think it's interesting, though. There's some definitely interesting correlation there where, are all those people, well, a lot of those people maybe had a little bit more of a plan than others, and maybe that's what led into that. And of course, not saying that's the only reason somebody's not going to, get to the point of suicide, because we
Right.
all know, there's just as many people out there that extremely successfully. You have no idea that that's even a issue, or they're not even on that path, and then it happens. I mean, I don't know about you.
Right.
The one thing that's interesting about the military, you have a pretty good group of close friends, and then you have all these friends that you're kind of loosely friends with. You maybe met them a few times, you're deployed with them, or did this and that, and because social media now, you get to follow them and stay friends with them on Facebook, Instagram, and stuff. And then every
Mhm.
once in a while, and I'm sure it's happened to all of us, something will pop up. Somebody's wife or spouse or something will say, "Hey, you know, so and so has passed," and your first question is, "What?" Like they're
Right.
35 years old. What happened? And so often it's due to suicide or something along those lines. And some of it maybe you could see it coming, and a lot of times you couldn't. You know what I mean? So it's just, yeah, definitely,
Right.
like you said, probably the biggest issue we're facing right now.
I would agree, and I hope that we're always improving. VA is always improving. Support organizations always improving, and it's my hope that we can get more information surrounding the individuals who decide to take their lives, and in order to use that data to mitigate. Ideally we'd get to zero, and
Yeah.
we'd be able to catch everyone at prime intervention points to get them the care and resources that they need, that they deserve.
Do you know
And
if there's any avenue for them to? Because, like, for example, we kind of hinted this before we even started recording today. Like for me, I have not used any of the VA for any type of medical care since I retired. I have
Mhm,
full TRICARE, so I've been using all my TRICARE. But as far
mhm,
as the VA knows, besides me applying for some disability, they don't really know at this point. Like, there's
mhm.
no stats on, hey, I've been seeing a therapist since I retired through TRICARE. And I would argue even TRICARE, minus the fact that they're getting a bill from said therapist, that's all they have too, because their records aren't being. I don't know if their records are being sent to TRICARE. I assume they're not. They're being kept at the my therapist level. Yeah, so interesting. There's probably a whole another swath of data and numbers out there that we got to bake into this too.
Right, that's another thing, especially, like, if you talk about veteran community care, folks who are going out into the community for their mental health care, like, I'm one of them. So,
Yeah.
how often are my records getting sent back to the VA? And I do know that, at a recent if I recall correctly, at a recent hearing, Secretary McDonough spoke about the VA is aware that they need to do better at getting those records for mental health, and other, people go into the community for all sorts of reasons.
Right.
Um, and so just VA is aware, cognizant of, and improving the retrieval of those records from the community, so that VA care providers can have a whole picture, a whole health picture of each veteran, to ensure that they're getting the care that is most appropriate for them. Because that's a really important piece.
Right.
If a veteran's not receiving all their care at the VA, a VA provider can inadvertently, um, maybe refer them to for a wrong therapy, or one that maybe that's not the ideal one, if they don't have that whole picture of what that veteran is getting in the community, in addition to the care they're getting within the VA healthcare system. So That is another challenge, but I do know that the VAs, that's something that they're looking at improving. And then on the TRICARE note, there is the electronic health EHRM, the electronic health record
Right.
modernization that's been ongoing with VA, and they've had some challenges with that implementation. DoD though has transitioned over its Genesis, so those
Yep.
health record systems, once they're both fully online, they're supposed to be able talk with one another so that VA healthcare providers can have that holistic picture of, of veterans, their DoD service records, and then their veteran specific health records to have a more complete picture there. So I don't unfortunately have an update on when that's going to be completed, but I know that it's in work.
Another piece that just dawned on me too, and we talked about a little about this earlier before we started today too. Like I said, I spoke at a conference on Tuesday about mental health and breaking down the stigma a bit. And after the conference, a woman had come up to me and mentioned her nephew who was a veteran and
Mhm.
who really hadn't, who, as in her words, basically said, "Hey, he really could use some help for his PTSD." Um, but he hasn't really been receiving any, as far as she knows, right? So it's interesting as we're just talking about this that okay, there's one person that knows this person needs help, right? And then on the flip side, there is some onus on the person too to get help. The stigma's alive and well, even after the Navy. It was alive and well, I know, for both of us while we were in the Navy. And then after the fact, society still has these weird things about mental health, where for all I know, is just said this person just maybe they want help, but they're hiding behind that stigma, or they can't fight through that stigma. Um,
Right.
and it's just interesting. Yeah, that there's definitely probably other avenues out there to investigate too. And then, is there an
Mhm.
avenue for family members to report stuff? And I hate to use the word report because it sounds so like um, not negative, but it has like a connotation of you're in trouble type thing. But like,
Right. Yeah.
um, because there is that behind mental health too. Like, oh, if you call the police, so they're going to arrest me, or am I automatically going to get committed, or this and that? And some states have different laws. But is there an
Right.
avenue out there to maybe say, hey, VA, like my nephew needs some help. Can you just have somebody reach out? And how easy it is to reach out to somebody. They don't have to know, right? I could be from the VA or be
Mhm.
from whatever entity and call this person and be like, hey, just let you know, the VA has these programs and we have these mental health programs. Like, there's doesn't even have to be a catalyst for that. The person, just for all they know, is they're getting a phone call that happens once a year or something. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That everybody gets, and maybe that'll be the trigger for them to go get help. I don't know. There's so many avenues we could explore. So
Right. And I'm really glad you brought that up because there is a program, and I don't know what time period this individual left service.
yeah, it
And
was probably similar
but
to us. So it's definitely recent.
okay.
A lot, in the last 10 years.
Okay. Um so they may have missed this period because there's the VA Solid Start program, which
Oh, right.
yep, so they start calling service members, doing outreach at different periods of time after individuals separate to talk with people about what their needs are, and whether they're knowledgeable about the VA home loan, the GI Bill, if they came out of service with uh, an illness or injury, that their service connected for, are they eligible for a program called VRE, which is a program that I used, and what it does is it takes into account uh, your service connected disability or disabilities, that might present an employment challenge, and they will develop a post-military career training plan with you to, includes, whether it's a tech school or a university, getting a degree, and they'll help tailor a career path for you that is mindful of that service-connected illness or injury, and so as not to put you into a career that will further aggravate it, right?
Right.
Um, so these individuals at VA are reaching out to service members to make them aware of these resources available to them if they could be beneficial, and then will give them, provide them with the resources to get that get those balls rolling, if you will. And so that is out there. And I think I've heard discussion of maybe wanting to expand that more because I know, like, for instance, my husband, he was wounded in the Marine Corps, and he was medically retired, and he still gets calls
Right.
from um, the Marine Corps is like Wounded Warrior Regiment, I believe it is. I might, I hope I'm not wrong on that, but he still gets calls. I've been here when they've called to check on him to see if
That's
he,
awesome.
how he's doing, and if he, has everything he needs or needs to be connected with resources. So these programs are out there. A question is, how can we scale them, to ensure that they're reaching veterans, because
Right.
there are numerous reasons why veterans don't step forward to engage uh, their benefits or get help in whatever aspect of their life they might need some assistance or could benefit from assistance. And like you said, to your point, that could range from stigma to um, also essentially like self-selecting out.
Right.
There's a challenge of, well, that's common. I've experienced it. I know others have, of, well, another veteran needs that more, or I
You hear
don't,
that a lot.
I don't rate that. So it's like a self deselection, if you
Right.
will.
Right.
So they, people can, or maybe they don't even identify as a veteran, which is challenging and sad, because I mean, if you served, you're a veteran, and
Right.
um, that doesn't what your service looks like. For instance, whether you deployed or you didn't deploy, like, you're still a veteran, right? Like, your service still mattered. It was still honorable, um, and you still are entitled to the benefits that you earned. And to engage those benefits doesn't mean that you're diminishing or taking away from another. And so there are myriad reasons why people don't engage, and and it's just something that really has to be considered
Yeah. It's almost,
as we
yeah,
try
I
to
agree
reach
because
them.
you see it a lot online.
Right.
And I think we all do it when we're in the military. It's really easy to
Mhm.
compare ourselves against another person when you're in uniform, and you see a warfare device, you see a bunch of ribbons on some person, the other person doesn't have it. Like, I think a lot of people automatically take that quick look and compare themselves, and then they don't stop. We all do it when we retire too, and
We do.
it's really easy to say, like, yeah, what is how do I equate my combat versus somebody else's combat? My combat versus a Navy SEALs or Special Operating Forces, experience. Like, how does that equate? But the reality is, my combat's my combat. My situation and experience are my situation, and that's how people have to look at it. I saw an interesting. It's
Right.
just funny that we're talking about this now because on Twitter today, and I apologize for whoever it is if you ever listen to this podcast. I don't remember his name or Twitter handle, but I think he was a Green Beret or something along those lines. He said, for us in the special operating community, we get the so much great recognition, and during the last OEF and OEF times, and he's like, but the reality is, like, we did such a small percentage of the missions compared to, like, just the regular military and all the other stuff that all the other folks do. He's like, those people are the ones that need to get the recognition, and those are the people that need to realize, like, hey, you guys are just as important. So it's kind of interesting to see that. And
Hmm.
but he's completely right, right. But again, like we
Agree.
said, we all do it. We don't. Plenty of us don't feel like we rate any type of disability or any type of support when other people we think other people do over that. But in reality, we all just gotta get over it and realize, we are individuals in this. We all did our time and our part, and we were,
Right.
one piece of the puzzle. And the other reality is if we weren't there to be that piece of the puzzle, the mission wouldn't have succeeded. It's a team effort. So
Exactly.
it
It
doesn't
is.
matter
It is.
what you did. I mean, it matters what you did, but it doesn't matter at what level, or whether you're the Gucci SEAL, or,
Mhm.
the guy that just cooked breakfast for 1,000 people. So
Right. Everyone is integral to the mission, whether you're in CONUS or OCONUS, deployed to, a country, an area that's at peace versus, a country that's in conflict. Um, nobody gets to really choose what their service looks like.
Yep.
It's I mean, especially, this like on active duty, it's the roll of the dice. It's like what orders are open next?
Yeah. Well,
Am I going to a ship that's pre-com is never going to
yeah.
leave the dock, right? Like nobody gets to really choose what their service looks like, and that was in the context of the Navy, of course. But um, service is service, period.
But how many of us like go to MEPS and
Yeah,
you get that as an enlisted guy, you get or enlisted folks or enlisted person, you get the. I remember getting a sheet for that explained the job that I chose, and
right.
I didn't. Okay, I kind of understand like one sentence in here. You have no idea unless some jobs are obviously more obvious than others, but in the end you don't
True,
know
true.
what you're getting into. You know what I mean? I mean,
We truly don't. Yeah,
yeah.
some people
Uh,
do have that luxury of like, you get to MEPS and it's like, okay, well, we have, we need this MOS or a rating, and
yeah.
in the Navy, we need this one, this one, and this one. This is where your ASVAB lands. This is what you qualify for. Do you want this one or this one?
Yep.
So there is some element of choice, really, but at the end of the day, it's the needs of the military, it's the needs of the individual service. And then when you get into the service, it's the needs of that community. You
Yeah.
know, for you and I, it was the intel community. Um, insert any other community that you might land in. And so that's something that I would like to impart on veterans is that it's not, I know that's easier said than done, right? But your service is your service, and it's um, because you did or did not, deploy somewhere or insert this, other um, scenario. Like it was still it was still service, and you still earned, you're
Yeah. And it was
still,
still important.
on the
Yeah.
other side, you're still a veteran. It was still important. We could not have been successful without you in the capacity that you were in.
Exactly.
And I've struggled with that as well, personally. So yeah, I just want to ensure that people, it's really easy for us to get in our own heads on that, and whether what we did was mattered or had an impact, especially for the people who are maybe junior enlisted, and they don't see the true impacts.
Right.
Maybe they're removed from the front line, and they don't actually know if what they did made a difference. And I think that's okay because we showed up, we served honorably, and we did the best that we could with what we had.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's really all you can ask for, right? And then,
Yep.
but like kind of like I would implore everybody out there if you're listening to this and you've not reached out about your benefits or you've not sought any of that out, take the time to do so. Reach out to a friend, reach out to the VA, reach out to anybody, reach out to your local BSO or anything like that,
Yep.
and just see what you can do. And there's plenty of places online too. There's a lot of pages on Facebook. Some are good, some are bad, but there's definitely plenty of info out there for that type of thing. So yeah, I would implore anybody out there to do that.
Likewise.
I don't know. We touched on a lot of stuff we wanted to
We
touch
have.
on. Any last thoughts on mental health, just from your standpoint? I know between the two of us, very important topic for the both of us. So I think anything else you'd like to impart to the listeners out there?
There's a lot. I don't know where to start. So, uh, all I have to say is, mental health is not. This is something that's very near and dear to me, and what I've learned is that mental health is a journey. It's not. It's not something. We don't get to where we are overnight, and we don't get out of where we are overnight either. So, and for me, it's been a real journey, and 10 plus year journey that spans, both during service and now as a veteran. And it's for me, this has been, it's actually been like a lifelong challenge. That I lost my sister when I was young in a very abrupt, tragic way.
Mhm.
And so, that really shaped my childhood and, everything after that point. And then how I responded to subsequent adversity too. And so what I would say is, it doesn't matter, veteran or not, trauma is trauma, and there's no need to compare there's no need to compare, traumas because everyone is different and how we respond to them when they happen. And then we're all um, every instance shapes who we are going forward and how we respond to subsequent events. So it's there's zero shame. I know we spoke about stigma. There doesn't need to be any shame or stigma associated with saying, "Hey, I'm not okay." I and I think that that's becoming more and more accepted, socially accepted,
I would say the
regardless.
same.
Again,
Yeah.
veteran or not, mental health is mental health, and
Yep.
um, I look forward to getting to a place where, like at my job, I work for the VFW, and we talk about mental health openly, honestly, and I would expect that. I mean, most of us are most of it the employees in my office were all, for the most part, post 9/11 veterans, and this is I can tell my boss when I'm not okay
Right.
because he gets it. Um, he's a retired senior enlisted Army a veteran, and because I could have the same conversation with my executive director, and so I hope that as a society we can get to a point where we talk about mental health in the same way we talk about any other chronic or emergent health condition. I broke my arm. I need to go get care. It's like, oh, I just had a really scary incident happen to me, and I'm not okay. I'm not in a good headspace. I need a minute, or I need to take a day to like let's normalize it to say, like, we have, I need a mental health day, just
Yeah, I
like
think people
I have a
struggle with that as
cold.
the physical. You can see a physical broken leg, and people
You can
struggle with
see it.
wrapping their heads around, for lack of a better term.
Right.
Somebody having a needing a mental health day, or hey, something just happened, and this is affecting me. It's easy to pinpoint when it's a physical ailment. But
It absolutely is. And I think we're getting there. I think we're getting to a place where, as a society, where it is becoming normalized, and I think that a big part of that is exactly what you and I are doing. We're
sure,
talking about it, and by all societal measures, like I was told a few months ago, like I would be, I'm taken aback that you're struggling, like, because I was being transparent. I was like, I need to go get care, and they're like, well, by all measures, you're like really successful. You have a college degree, you're, insert all of these other, stereotypical, measures of success that society has decided mean that you should be fine, and you
all
should
right.
be happy, and your life should be, you have nothing to complain about. Your life looks perfect. It's like, well,
It's easy. Well,
that
I
doesn't
think,
mean anything.
and I don't want to say it's
How I
easier for veterans to hide it, but I do think they're like the military service kind of builds up these shields around us where it is
Right.
easier for us to hide it because it's like a normal thing. Like, oh no, let's not let anybody know that we're having
Right.
issues.
Right. Depending on the context. Like I said, plenty of people, in service, service is a phenomenal endeavor. And you made a point a while back that maybe it was before we started recording, about how um like everyone's service looks different, and how you know the spheres you're in once you get there, whether it's your unit or the community you're in, can kind of have an impact on
Sure.
you know what your service looks like, whether you're deploying, whether, like, for me, I was chosen to deploy individually to to Afghanistan, and that shaped that shaped who I am today. And so it's part of that is how we talk about mental health, and then also, while we're in, we talking about mental health and normalizing it, which doesn't happen. It's happening slowly, but I think that there are still pockets where, to your point, people do try to hide it, and
Yeah.
are, and it's not necessarily hide it from a perspective of like, um, maybe denial or what have you, but because people have fears, like for instance, oh well, if I raise my hand and say I'm not doing okay, will my security clearance be taken away? It's
Right.
like, well, no,
Yep.
it won't be.
It won't be. You're
Um,
good.
you're yeah, as long as you're saying, hey, for me, I told the individual at my command, hey, I am getting mental health care. What does this mean? And she was like, it doesn't mean anything. Thank you for
Yeah, you're
telling
good.
me.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what if I need medication? She said, you're good. Just tell me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh gosh, what a relief.
A
Like,
relief. Yeah.
but that is a very real fear.
It
So
is.
we have these, even if we're able to talk about it openly, there's still stigma and fear about what might happen within certain communities of the military and even elsewhere. This isn't just unique to the military, right? There's all sorts of
Definitely.
occupations that people are afraid to raise their hand in. I think I just saw something about the FAA doing a major review of pilots and their mental health, and barriers that they experience to getting appropriate mental health care. And it's because well, they don't want to have their health certificates revoked.
Yeah. Talk about a
Uh,
community that definitely doesn't like to report. Right.
right,
There's definitely some barriers there for those folks, which is bad.
right. And so it's a big part of this is identifying those barriers, regardless of whether it's military or, you know, whether it's military or veteran related or insert any other occupation. It's like, well, what people might be able to talk about it candidly by them, amongst themselves. It's becoming more normalized, but maybe they're afraid to step forward because of barriers that we are
Right.
not
Right.
aware of. And what are those barriers? And then how can we mitigate those barriers proactively as leaders, as managers, um, even as lawmakers?
That's true.
So, and this ties back to the very beginning of the conversation of advocacy, and the need to be at the table and talk about these things. Obviously there's safety considerations,
Right.
depending on, like, in aviation, you want to make sure that somebody is fit to pilot aircraft. And you know that's obviously not I can't make any judgments like that, but there's difference between um understanding, like, the security clearance thing, understanding that somebody is getting this help and it's therapeutic and it's helping them, and they're still 100% functional and able to carry out their duties. But that doesn't just because they have this label or what have you, doesn't necessarily make them incapable or disqualified to do that job,
Exactly.
or other activity. So
Um, the other day, I got asked the question, where do you find the strength to talk about these things in public and things like that? And I laugh because usually my first response is, it's pure misery. I don't want to do it. Right. And maybe it's a little dramatic because I don't, but I think in the end, a lot of us don't necessarily want to talk about it. But
yeah.
we do see the benefit. And when I was asked that question, it took me a second to really think about the answer. And it dawned on me, when I originally started doing some of this training back in 2017, and I started to see the success, I would say, from it, or maybe the fruits of our labor when we did this, and we started to see some people be more open about it and self-report and things like that. I kind of realized, well, that's kind of where the strength comes from. And I would say,
Mhm.
knowing your background, my background. I can't thank you for coming on tonight.
Yep.
I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. I think our voices, whether we reach, I tell people we all need to reach one person, and if we reach one person, we're successful.
Yep.
And we hope we hope everybody that we can reach out to will seek out their care that they need. But like I said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I remember, we said earlier how we try to keep in touch with people we've been in the military
Yeah.
with, and I think even back in the day, we, over coffee the other day, we kind of hinted at this. We probably did some more self-care, mental health type stuff back in the day when we were deployed, and we didn't even know
Mhm.
about it. A lot of us went. There was a group of us that always went and got coffee, and it was kind of like our let's take a break moment. And whether we knew we were doing it or not, I don't know. I don't remember. But
Right.
there's those things and those weird connections you make, and you realize back then, oh, wait a minute, and now, here we are, 14 years later, talking about mental health again and trying to,
Mhm.
make it put it out there on the forefront. And I will just say, I don't remember what year it was. You know better than me when I think you spoke did you speak at Congress or Senate or something? I'm hearing.
Oh, it was a year ago.
Was it
Geez,
real?
almost on the dot. Yeah. I spoke on transition in front of
Yeah. I
the
remember seeing,
House
I think
Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity.
seeing it on
It's crazy.
Facebook or something. I remember thinking, this is, we've kept in touch over the years, but before I really reached back out for something, I had you come on and talk more about the mental health and podcast stuff. I remember sitting on there. I'm like, holy crap, that's Brittany speaking in Congress right now. I was like, amazing. It's amazing. What the strength that it took you to go out there and talk about stuff is awesome. So, like I said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. You're an inspiration to me, and I appreciate everything. And
Thank you.
I know we'll keep in touch, and hopefully we'll work on some more things together. And then who knows? Maybe we'll see you on the podcast again, or see where it goes.
Absolutely. I would love to. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Josh. It's been phenomenal to reconnect. And I'm really psyched to see where your podcast goes. I was super thrilled and really I guess heartened by learning about this, this effort that you're doing, and I commend you because it's really important work, and I genuinely appreciate you doing this. So, if our paths shall cross again, I look forward to it. But if not, in this capacity at least, thank you for having me.
No, thanks, and
I
thanks for the
appreciate your
kind
time.
words. Your banner if you need help, and raise your banner to let others know you're a safe person to turn to. Until next time, stick around and keep on moving forward. Research conducted by Matrixa Research Group. Artwork created by Jenna Bordinger at jbordingerart.com or at jbordinger_art on Instagram. And music by Josiah Renton, DJ Slowbro.